I sat quietly beside the bed watching Emily, my wife, as she rested. She was overdue, and each day seemed to stretch endlessly, a quiet anticipation hanging in the air. I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred, her eyes slowly opening.
How long have you been sitting there?
Long enough to remember why I fell in love with you. I replied, trying to infuse some lightness into the moment.
She smiled, but it was shadowed with unease. She said, a hint of frustration in her tone.
I just wish Margaret would let us have these last few days to ourselves. Margaret, my mother-in-law, had always been a thorn in our side, particularly for Emily. I had witnessed her harsh treatment and unkind words towards Emily over the years, each incident casting a long shadow over our lives. I said, recalling the difficult conversation, I spoke to her yesterday, told her we needed space, especially with the baby coming. The midwife was clear about the stress being bad for both of you.
Her expression tightened. And how did she take it?
About as well as you'd expect. But I was firm. This time is about us, our new family.
Her hand found mine, her grip tight. She said, her eyes moist.
I just can't handle her right now, not with the baby so close. I reassured her, holding her hand firmly. I know. I'll take care of it. We sat together, the unspoken history of Margaret's behavior between us. From demeaning comments to more overt acts of hostility, the impact on Emily was profound. But in that moment, with the gentle morning light around us, I felt a renewed determination. I was ready to protect Emily and our soon-to-be-born child, no matter what it took. As Emily fell back into a light sleep, my thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car outside. Peering through the window, my heart sank at the sight of Margaret's car in the driveway. She had come uninvited, as was her habit. Taking a deep breath, I stood up. It was time to confront what lay ahead. As I descended the stairs to confront Margaret, my mind raced back through the years, replaying the myriad of ways she had inflicted pain upon Emily. It was like flipping through a dark photo album, each memory a snapshot of cruelty. Emily was 16 when I first met her. Even then, Margaret's shadow loomed large over her life. I remember a high school dance where Emily's hair had been roughly chopped off, an uneven bob that she tried to hide under a hat. She had whispered to me, her eyes downcast. That was Margaret, always asserting control even over Emily's appearance. Mom thought it would look better short. The abuse wasn't just physical. It was the constant gaslighting, the relentless undermining of Emily's reality. Margaret, aided by David and Alex, would spin tales, weaving false narratives that left Emily questioning her own sanity. They were a united front against her, a family that seemed to relish in her confusion and pain. One particular incident stood out in my mind. It was a family dinner, a supposed celebration of Emily's promotion at work. Instead of congratulations, Margaret had spent the evening belittling Emily's achievements, comparing her unfavorably to Alex, the golden child. She had said, her words dripping with disdain, "You might have a fancy job, but Alex has real skills." It was more than just words. There were the unannounced visits, the unwanted gifts that felt more like invasions, the blatant disrespect of our space and privacy. They would sneak into our house when we were out, going through our things, leaving a trail of discomfort and unease in their wake. Their treatment of Alex was a stark contrast. Nearly 40, he lived a life devoid of responsibility or consequences, his every need catered to by Margaret. He was a bully, both physically and verbally abusive, not just to Emily, but to his own parents. Yet in Margaret's eyes, he could do no wrong. These memories fueled my resolve as I opened the front door. Margaret stood there, her expression one of feigned concern. I greeted her, my tone measured. "Margaret," I said, "what brings you here today?" She said, her voice dripping with insincerity, "I just wanted to see how Emily is doing. You know, with the baby coming and all. I've told you, Emily needs rest and space. Your visits are stressing her out." Margaret's face twisted into a scowl. "I'm her mother. I have every right to be here. Not when your presence is harmful. We've discussed this," I said, standing firm. She huffed, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're keeping me from my daughter and my grandchild." "I'm protecting my family, Margaret. That's my right." As she turned and stormed off, I knew this was far from over. But for now, I had drawn a line. one that I hoped would shield Emily and our child from the shadows of her family's past. The days following my confrontation with Margaret were tense, filled with a silence that was both welcome and foreboding. Emily, sensing the undercurrents, often asked if everything was all right. Each time I assured her it was, not wanting to add to her stress. But the truth was, things were far from all right. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something inevitable and potentially explosive. Margaret's visits had stopped, but her presence loomed like a dark cloud over our home. One afternoon, while Emily rested upstairs, I heard a knock at the door. Bracing myself for another round with Margaret, I was surprised to find David standing there, his eyes downcast. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, leading him into the living room. The tension was palpable as he sat down, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "It's about Alex," he began, his voice strained. "Margaret doesn't see it, but he's out of control." I listened, my heart heavy, as David recounted recent incidents of Alex's aggression. He spoke of unprovoked outbursts of physical altercations that left both him and Margaret bruised and shaken. It was a side of Alex I had seen glimpses of, but never to this extent. David concluded, his eyes meeting mine. "But Margaret won't hear of it. She says we're imagining things, that Alex is just spirited." The revelation was jarring, yet not entirely surprising. The family's denial of Alex's behavior, their refusal to acknowledge the damage he caused, was a pattern long established. "I agree he needs help," I said. "But if Margaret won't see it..." David nodded, a look of resignation on his face. "I just thought you should know. For Emily's sake." After he left, I sat alone, processing the conversation. The situation was more complex than I had realized. It wasn't just Margaret's treatment of Emily, it was the entire family dynamic. A toxic environment that enabled and excused Alex's behavior. I knew then that protecting Emily and our child meant more than just keeping Margaret at bay. It meant acknowledging the brokenness of her family, and perhaps accepting that some fractures were beyond repair. That night, as I lay beside Emily, her hand resting on her swollen belly, I felt a resolve harden within me. Whatever it took, I would shield them from the storm that was brewing, even if it meant cutting ties with a family that was drowning in its own dysfunction. In the days that followed the family gathering, Emily and I talked long into the nights, unraveling the years of manipulation and control exerted by her family. It was a painful process, each conversation unearthing more of the buried trauma she had endured. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Emily's phone buzzed with a message. It was from her cousin, someone we rarely heard from. The text was brief but jarring. "Heard what happened at the dinner. I'm sorry. You deserve better." This simple message from an unexpected source was like a small crack in a dam, and slowly the truth began to seep through. Over the next few days, more messages arrived, each one shedding light on the false narratives that Margaret and her family had spun about us. "We always wondered why you seem so distant at family events," one read. "I heard your mom talking about how difficult you were, but it never added up," said another. Each message was a revelation, peeling back the layers of deceit we had been enmeshed in. It became increasingly clear that Margaret's influence extended far beyond what we had imagined, tainting our relationships and reputation within the wider family. The most damning revelation came from an unexpected source. David, in a rare moment of candor, confided in me about the extent of Alex's hold over the family. David admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, "He's threatened us, you know." His voice barely above a whisper. "If we don't do as he says, he becomes violent. We're afraid of him." This confession was a chilling insight into the dysfunction at the heart of Emily's family. Alex, enabled and protected by Margaret, had become a tyrant in his own home, his actions unchecked and excused. As these truths came to light, Emily's resolve hardened. She said one night, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "We can't be part of this anymore," she said. "It's not just about us now. It's about our child. I won't let them grow up in the shadow of this madness." I held her close, my own emotions a tumult of anger, sadness, and protective fierceness. "We'll start anew," I promised. "We'll build our own family, free from all this." The decision to cut ties with her family was not an easy one for Emily, but it was necessary. We began the process of disentangling our lives from theirs, each step a move towards freedom and healing. As we prepared for the birth of our child, I felt a weight lifting from our shoulders. We were stepping out of the shadows into a future we would shape on our own terms. The day our child was born was a day of mixed emotions. As I held our baby for the first time, looking into those innocent eyes, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness, unlike anything I had ever known. But lurking in the back of my mind was the knowledge of the confrontation that awaited us. Emily, exhausted but radiant, cradled our baby gently. She whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "We did it," she said. "We have our family now." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride and love. But as we basked in the joy of our new arrival, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending conflict. Margaret had made it clear she expected to be a part of our child's life, but after everything, that was impossible. In the days that followed, as we adjusted to our new life, the reality of our situation became increasingly clear. Margaret's attempts to insert herself into our lives intensified. She called repeatedly, each message a mix of sweet talk and veiled threats. The final straw came one afternoon when we found a pile of gifts outside our door, all from Margaret. Among them was a note to my grandchild who I will see no matter what. That night, Emily and I sat down and made the decision. We would go completely no contact with her family. It was the only way to protect our child and ourselves from the cycle of abuse and manipulation. The process was painful, filled with legal consultations and emotional discussions. But with each step, I felt a sense of liberation, as if we were shedding the weight of years of oppression. As I watched Emily with our baby, her laughter free and unburdened, I knew we had made the right choice. We were starting anew, creating a family built on love, respect, and safety. Our journey was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of anger, that we had severed ties with the only family Emily had ever known. But in those moments, we found strength in each other and in the love we had for our child. We moved to a new home, a place untainted by the past. Here, in this space of our own making, we began to heal. Our child grew, surrounded by love and free from the shadows that had once loomed so large. In this new dawn, we found peace. We had stepped out of the darkness and into a future of our own choosing. Our family, though small, was a fortress against the turmoil we had left behind. As I looked at Emily and our child, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and in its wake we had found something precious, a life of our own, filled with hope and endless possibilities.